Thanks very much, Donna. And I must say it seems strange to be up here on the podium of a BC Federation of Labour convention after all those years I spent down in the trenches covering the Fed for the Sun, the Province, CBC TV, and the Globe and Mail in the days when there actually were Labour reporters. But I'm very proud to be here on this particular occasion, and it's inspiring to hear from all those young workers, but to tell you about a very special Labour leader, someone who has been part of the BC Labour movement, if you can believe it, for most of the past 74 years. And that's longer than Queen Elizabeth reigned over England. And I'm talking about Brother Ray Haynes, head of the BC Federation of Labour from 1966 to 1973, and arguably the most influential leader in the history of the BC Fed. Under his hands-on leadership, the BC Labour movement became by far the most militant in the country as it fought tooth and nail against hard-nosed employers and the reactionary anti-union government of W.A.C. Bennett. The son of a Vancouver police detective, Ray Haynes started his working life on the green chain at the long-gone Canadian White Pine sawmill on the Fraser River. It was there that he learned the basics of trade unionism from the IWA. And that's 20-year-old Ray Haynes, second from the left there with the big grin and the hat. A few years later, Brother Haynes was working, of all things, as a tea blender, whatever that was, in the wholesale division of Hudson's Bay. Fed up with the pay and working conditions, he organized the place. That's signed up 29 of the 30 workers. That skill didn't go unnoticed, and he was soon hired by Retail Wholesale, where he rose to international representative and then to Secretary-Treasurer of the BC Federation of Labour in 1966. The top person was always the Secretary-Treasurer in those days. And it's hard to imagine today how tough it was for unions back then. It was a time when labor leaders regularly went to jail for defying court injunctions against picketing. Ray liked to recall, "I'd been on the job one day and already 10 more people were in jail for contempt of court." And he was often down at the courthouse speaking out against the latest jailing. Labour was in almost constant warfare, strike after strike, protests seemingly every day, and that all-out fight against the terrible anti-union legislation brought in by the Socreds. He galvanized the Federation to treat every dispute as its own, rallying support for unions when they needed it, and enforcing policies that remain today, respect for picket lines and hot boycotts. And there's Ray supporting one of the postal workers strikers. I'll say no more. It was a different time, and Ray Haynes and the Federation were everywhere. When he talked, people listened. At the same time, Brother Haynes broadened the interests of the Federation beyond the immediate issues of the BC Labour movement. The organization backed Cesar Chavez and his courageous campaign to organize California farm workers to the hilt. And some of you may be old enough to remember that struggle. By declaring a boycott of non-union picked grapes in unionized supermarkets in BC, and it was the most effective such action in North America. As the Vietnam War raged, Ray Haynes was a frequent speaker at peace rallies opposing the war, like this one at Peace Arch Park. In 1971, he did something remarkable. He called on union workers to stop work for 30 minutes to protest the United States plan to test an atomic bomb on Amchitka Island in Alaska. Hard-hatted construction workers paraded through downtown Vancouver in response. "For the first time in North America," said Ray, "workers are downing tools, not over wages, not over working conditions, but because of a danger to all mankind." But nothing highlighted the powerful force the BC Federation of Labour became under Ray Haynes' leadership. Nothing highlighted it more than Labour's 4-year fight against Bill 33, one of the most anti-union laws in Canadian history. The bill created a mediation commission that had the power to settle any labor dispute in the province, private sector and the public sector, by binding arbitration. What did the Fed do? They organized a 4-year boycott of the commission. It held, and the commission proved a total failure. There was also constant struggle on the ground. In fact, there was so much industrial relations turmoil that voters finally turned their back on W.A.C. Bennett and elected BC's first NDP government, led by Dave Barrett, who changed the face of the province. Not everyone in the Labour movement loved Ray Haynes, who was the BC Federation of Labour after all, and he had to fight off a few challenges over the years, but he won them all. But after 7 tumultuous years at the top, he stepped down from the Fed in 1973. But you can't keep a Labour man down, and he was soon back in the Labour movement, hired by the BC Nurses Union, a different BC Nurses Union, to lead a tough organizing drive in BC's long-term care facilities, helping with arbitrations and being a mentor to union members. After that, there was work for more unions and many years as the Sunshine Coast representative for the BC Federation of Retired Union Members, although I'm not sure Ray ever really retired. During his many years on picket lines, legal and illegal, Brother Haynes somehow managed to avoid being arrested. Finally, in 2012, as part of his lifelong commitment to environmentalism, he was among a group of protesters who blockaded a coal train headed to Roberts Bank and was arrested. He was 84 years old and still on the line. Brothers and sisters, I ask you to acknowledge the great Ray Haynes. Ray, get up there. Wave.
Thank you very much. It's all too much for me today, and I was told that I didn't have to speak, but I can see that with that kind of introduction, wow, if I didn't speak, I don't know what I would do. I was here for, as you heard, from 65 until 73, and I had a terrific life. I have to tell you that. And I try and tell young people now that don't take a job that you're not going to be happy with just because it pays a bit more money. That's very important that you get a proper salary. But you sure got to have a job that you like. And I used to be able to jump out of bed every morning and rush to the BC Federation of Labour, and I enjoyed it very much. I left in 73. Thinking that I would have a new kind of life, and instead I was back very quickly doing labor work on a contract basis, and then finally 10 years, which were very good with the BC Nurses Union, where I, myself and 2 nurses, organized about 1,000 long-term care workers. And I've always felt good about that. When I quit the BC Federation of Labour, they had to hire 2 guys to do my job. The president and the secretary-treasurer. I found out later, though, that they had to do that to clean up the mess. I always thought that this federation spoke out more than any other federation. I don't want to belittle the others, but I can tell you that we were the only labor federation or that kind of a group in North America that did such a job on the Great Workers' Strike. And we got invited down to Cesar Chavez's location down in the States. So we did a lot we actually said, don't buy the grapes. And everybody else was saying, don't buy the grapes. And then we said, well, that's not quite enough. Let's not handle the grapes. And we had a couple of produce outfits, and we stopped handling them. We convinced the Teamsters to stop handling the grapes. And I think that was a contribution, quite a contribution to winning the strike. I got a kick out of the fact that the labor movement was a very important movement, and they only had 3 labor reporters covering the situation at that time. And now, I don't know what the labor movement's got to do to get something in the press, but it's very, very difficult, and they don't have anybody really as a labor reporter. So we still got a big job to do, and I'm very honored and pleased to be invited here today, and I happen to be in town tonight for a poker game, so with some old labor friends, it was a way we celebrated the convention. We'd play after the service here, sometimes till 2 o'clock in the morning. Some guys went longer, but I got out at 2. And it was an honor to be in the Federation at that time. I don't know what else I can tell you, is that I'm just so happy to see all these faces here and everything, and keep up the good fight. And I got a couple more years behind me, so I'll try and be with you. I did get arrested. I never got arrested for all my labor stuff. I don't know why, but I did get arrested for blocking a train down at White Rock. But it was a bit embarrassing because when they tried to get me in the police car, they had a terrible time. My legs were falling apart and all that kind of stuff. And then when we went into the police office, everybody had to lay on the floor. Not me. They gave me a chair. So I've had a chair here today, and I thank you very much and wish you well.